Hello and welcome to the Events Podcast, where we talk each week with event professionals about how they plan, promote and run their events. Whether you're running small meetups or large conferences, exhibitions and concerts, we focus on finding actionable tips that you can use straight away. This podcast is sponsored by our ticketing system, EventsFrame. We developed the system after running 300 plus events with my company Apps Events, and we had an endless search for an amazing and cost-effective ticket solution. We tried everything and we designed EventsFrame to be super easy to use with the best discount options out there. You can embed tickets in your own site or you can use our simple event site builder. Most importantly, we have no ticketing fees. Normally event systems, they charge you 3% or more. We just charge a large, flat, low monthly fee. We've got hundreds of live events all across the world. We integrate with Stripe, PayPal, Braintree, and bank transfer. So please head on over to eventsframe.com for a free trial, and we'd love for you to check it out. So this week, I'm in Prague as usual. It's been a really busy week for my company Apps Events in terms of running events. We ran some roadshow events in Bergen, Norway, together with Google. We had a training boot camp in Seattle. We've had a bunch of events in London and Newcastle in the UK and Scotland as well, Edinburgh. So it's been super busy. We've got a great team, and that's really great when you can scale events to have people running them without you always being there, which is fortunately the stage we're at. With my second company, EventsFrame, it's been really busy as well. We did a launch on Product Hunt. I don't know who knows Product Hunt, but it's a website where you can launch a product. It's interesting. There's a whole system to it. You get somebody called a hunter to effectively pitch your product on Product Hunt, and then you get people commenting, upvoting. You share videos. It was great. We had a lot of interest. So if you want to have a look on Product Hunt, you can see EventsFrame. We got a lot of really, really good feedback. Finally, to say, if you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review in iTunes, or even better, drop me an email, dan@eventsframe.com. I'd love to hear from you, and I answer every email, so it'd be great to hear from you. I'd love to know what do you want, give me tips on what guests you want, and any feedback on the interviews. So today's interview is with Will Kunhardt, and genuinely this, I think, is the best interview yet. It was fascinating. He's a really fascinating guy. Will Kunhardt is a classically trained violinist who wanted to be a conductor, and obviously this is one of the most competitive jobs in the world, so he got his start by actually putting on his own concerts and employing himself as a conductor, and then he parlayed that into conducting with some of the world's biggest orchestras like the Halle Orchestra. He then founded his own orchestra, the Arensky Chamber Orchestra, which he then moved into running a series of immersive experiences. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard of immersive experiences, but if you Google it, it's a whole category of events where you go to an event and it can be a dinner or it can be a concert or it can be a combination, and everything is themed around a certain topic. In his case, it was normally themed around musical pieces or plays, but he puts on these amazing events, and we talk a lot about how Will still remains creative. He's still a conductor and a musician, and he produces real works of art in his events, but they make him money. So he really, he's a businessman without being a businessman. He produces works of art and he still makes money out of it. So this was a great interview. It was supposed to be half an hour. We talked for more than an hour. So I really hope you enjoy it. So here is Will. Hello and welcome to the Events Podcast. And today I'm really delighted to be talking, and I'm sure I'm going to get your name wrong in advance. It's William Kunhardt, is that correct?
Yeah, actually, to be honest, you've done a good job there. It's just simple. Yeah, Kunhardt.
It's the D that confuses you.
Yeah, that throws people. You get all kinds of pronunciations because of that D.
Definitely. Well, William is a fascinating guy. I've been reading about him quite a bit online. He's a conductor and he's got quite a varied experience conducting in various orchestras. And the main reason we're talking today is he runs something called The Great Christmas Feast, which is at greatchristmasfeast.com, which looks amazing. It's kind of like an immersive, I'm probably describing it wrong again, but it looks like an immersive dining experience. It's themed around a kind of Charles Dickens Christmas, secret location, limited numbers, and it's running for the whole of December. And I'm keen to learn more about what journey led him to be running this event and how he runs it. So hello, Will.
Yeah, hi Dan. Nice to speak with you.
Great. So Will, we just started talking before we started recording. I'm really curious about your background because it's interesting. Like being a conductor, it's a fascinating sort of career choice. Obviously, you don't meet many people doing it, so I'm curious how that came about and what your background is.
My background in music is actually, it starts with the violin, which is obviously something a bit more normal that a lot of children do when they're very young. So I just started playing the violin when I was 4, and it grew and grew from there to the point where when I was 18, I went to music college to study the violin in London, a place called the Royal College of Music in London. And very quickly, I kind of had this feeling that maybe my particular spread of things that I was good at, confident in, whatever it might be, they really kind of aligned with conducting, which was not something I had tried before I was 18. I mean, who has really? It's quite hard to sort of find an orchestra when you're in your teens. But here I was at music college, and I was kind of thinking that this conducting thing might be something I could be good at. And so because I was surrounded by other young musicians, I was able to start organizing concerts of orchestras that I was putting together to perform orchestral pieces and then conduct them. And that's kind of how I cut my teeth in conducting. And I suppose that's how I started organizing concerts. It was never really because I wanted to become an event organizer. It's actually because in order to try out this skill and find out if it was something I wanted to do, I had to organize concerts because there aren't just orchestras lying around, you know.
That's fascinating, because I've done similar things in different areas where, you know, there wasn't an opportunity for me to speak at an event related to what I was doing. It was actually education technology, so I just started running my own event, which is like something I guess a lot of people don't think of. You know, you can create your own event. Well, you know, you can sort of, you know, put together your own piece of music, and then all of a sudden you've got experience because, you know, you put this together and you've got experience as a conductor.
Yeah, totally. And I've always thought that those quite high barrier to entry things, when you come across something that you want to do where you see there's this really high barrier to entry like that, like you're going to have to contact and find 60 people, put them together into an orchestra, and that's just like the start of it, because you're going to have to learn this piece of music, learn how to conduct, you're going to have to somehow like get some people to come to this concert, find a venue, blah blah blah. Like when you come to something that's that daunting, it's often like it's an indicator, isn't it, that this could really be something good for you to do, because you can just imagine how many people must drop out at that stage when they realize what would be required. So if you can be one of those few people that actually is able to push through and climb that mountain, actually in a way that's a brilliant way to find something you can be successful at, because there's going to be hardly anyone that's going to be willing to do that.
That's the thing. It's also like not being a prima donna, because a lot of people who are probably very talented, I'm sure you are very talented like a lot of people, but you're in a competitive field. A lot of people think, well, people should be coming to me and paying me to conduct, you know, but then if you haven't got experience, who's going to do that? There's probably 1,000 other wannabe conductors who want to be, you know, performing.
Yeah, I think two things that have happened is, well, first of all, there's that like revisionist thing. It's just that when you actually go back into the nitty gritty of like really great performers and musicians through history, and you think of those like really classic people like Mozart or Beethoven, another person I think of is Wagner. Actually, all of those people were demons when it came to like trying to get money and trying to get performances. Like you'd think that maybe they were just, because we're talking about the greatest genii or whatever the word would be of all time, and actually when you look at how much time they had to spend like doing the dirty work, marketing themselves, for want of better words, not that word existed then I guess, but essentially marketing themselves, growing their quote unquote brand, they spent tons of time doing it. There's thousands of letters from Beethoven like kind of manipulating people into giving him concerts, giving him money so he can write music. Wagner, exactly the same. Mozart, all these people. So there's this revisionist thing that when you come to look at them, you just see this genius, which is the true part, but also what seems to be just kind of a string of successes and opportunities, and you don't actually see the dirty work that went into them. And then I think the other thing is, because I used to really suffer from that a lot, is that I just really stopped caring. I actually don't, because I used to have this fear that, the more I organise, the more my colleagues as musicians are going to think, he has to organise things because he's no good. And the older I get, I mean, I say the older I get, I'm 29 now, the less I just don't even really care. As long as, like, if organizing things gets me to where I want, doing the things I want to be doing, I don't really mind. Even if this, which is definitely not true, even though I know it's not true, I've come to the point where I say, even if it is true that people are saying to me, or saying about me, oh, he's organizing events because people don't ask him for theirs. Don't mind, really, because I love doing what I'm doing so much that if that's the price I have to pay, fine.
It's interesting. I mean, Steve Jobs said, "Great." I think it was "Great artistship" was his quote. You know.
Yeah. I always talk about finishing things.
Yeah, it's true. You know, it's interesting because like my musical experience is a completely different level to yours. It's more like rock and punk rock. I play bass guitar and I've played in some bands, and punk's an interesting scene because, like, it has this DIY ethos built into it, you know, like it's all about like doing everything yourself and bypassing the system. But, you know, so many big punk bands signed to major record labels. And it's interesting, like how much they try to pretend they're not kind of playing the system, you know, because they don't want to lose a sort of respect. But they're running it as a business. And there's, you know, I've got no problem with it because, I'm in my 40s now. I'm not idealistic, and people have to pay mortgages and they have to live, and you have to make money, you know. But it's interesting how much in that particular scene they're desperate to say they don't make money out of it, and it's not a business, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't have experience in that kind of side of music, but I think it is a great strength of a scene like that, because I think, well, conversely, one of the strengths and weaknesses of like classical music, orchestral music, that the stuff that I do and love, is that it's become so abstracted. But it's been around for so much longer than any other genre of Western music anyway, that like it's become so abstracted, which is great in one sense. It means we've got these like works of unimaginable complexity, works of music and things of unimaginable complexity that deliver such profound emotional messages, and they're so sort of deeply moving, because this art form's been developed and developed and developed. But then on the other hand, it's kind of become so abstracted that it has lost touch with how the world works, and that can sometimes be a real weakness, whether it's in terms of like actually people wanting to come to concerts, or whether it's musicians being practical enough that they are actually able creatively to do the things they want to do. On both sides of the coin, sort of behind the scenes and, you know, back of house and front of house, it leads to weaknesses when an art form becomes this abstract.
Absolutely fascinating. Look, I want to move on a bit. So can we talk about your career? As obviously, you know, you've talked about how you got started running these events, and I see you're involved in something called the Arensky Chamber Orchestra, and you're doing a few things. Like, I mean, I know very little about your world. Is it, I guess, as a conductor, are you essentially a freelancer, or do people work full time for an orchestra? What's kind of the life of a conductor?
There's a few things to this, or a few parts to this, I suppose. So, like, if I just go chronologically, when I got to college, I had a very standard ambition standard but incredibly amazing and difficult ambition of becoming a top flight international conductor. And to answer your question, what that would probably mean is being the resident conductor or principal conductor of a major orchestra somewhere in the world, which would tie you down to quite a few weeks of the year, but not as many as people think. People would think, oh, the principal conductor, he must be in there 52 weeks of the year. Can often be as little as 10 weeks of the year that a principal conductor is contracted to be conducting with the orchestra that they are responsible for. And then you'd spend the rest of the time traveling the world, conducting orchestras of, you know, different cities. So most orchestras, particularly, as I said, the top flight orchestras, have this massive schedule roster of guest conductors that come and work with them. That was my goal, because that's very much how the industry has developed, conducting within classical music. That's how it's developed. That's the kind of career you can aspire for. I suppose a few things started to happen over the years. Most of them were like kind of philosophical things that problems that I started to have with that career. You know, even if I should be so lucky as to ever get to that point, I started to have some kind of issues with it. I think the first one was, it's hard to say. I think there's a lot of problems in classical music as a business, and some of them get in the way, particularly in large organizations. If you're in a tiny organization like a quartet of four, you're not going to get troubled by these things. But there are issues with it, just like economically, things like that mean that sometimes conducting orchestras can be quite a difficult experience. Even things like the pay gap between a conductor and an orchestral musician, which is pretty vast.
Yep.
And the higher up the food chain you go, the larger it gets. I think they're just and that's, you can go into why that is. There's a whole sort of book and novel in itself, how that developed. But it developed sort of in the 20th century. But it leads to, I suppose quite rightly, a potentially quite negative environment in which this one person walks into a room who's being paid 20, 30 times what anyone else is being paid. And it almost becomes like a sort of test of their mettle, as opposed to a kind of positive. And this is painting with a really broad brush. There's loads of orchestras that are like completely not even remotely like that. Sure. But then on the other hand, there are a lot of orchestras that are like that, where there's this sense of almost like test and conflict almost, that you have to prove yourself in some capacity. And I just didn't know whether going about city after city, week after week, sort of proving yourself and then proving yourself again and then proving yourself again. I wasn't sure whether life is too short for that kind of, whether that kind of stuff. I'm not quite sure I'm macho enough to be interested in like, I don't get enough of a kick out of that sort of test, I don't think. So that became something that I started to think about a lot. As I grew up a little bit. Met my partner Amy, started to think about whether, as a long-term partner, as in the future as a husband, and then in the future as a father, whether like being away from home sort of 40 weeks of the year was the right thing to do. That became another thing. Sure. All kinds of questions about this. I suppose they all boil down to control and the ability, I think that's very kind of on trend in entrepreneurship and business, of designing your own life and designing a perfect life, and that whole kind of, that whole 4-hour work week thing of Tim Ferriss and all this stuff.
That's my Bible, by the way. I've read that book probably 10 times.
There you go. And I suppose the message underneath it, which sometimes gets lost, I think, that the point being that you should be able to design the perfect life. I suppose I started to think that like this way of being, of classical conducting being quite a set thing, that maybe I'd have no power to change as an individual. So I'm just a drop in the ocean, and like whether I wanted to be put into something that someone else had invented that didn't necessarily match with my ideals. I think another thing that actually completely creatively, I would say that, if you took two really top conductors and you blindfolded an audience, and the first conductor walked out to do the first movement of a symphony, and then he walked off and the next conductor walked on to do the second movement of a symphony, if you could do that process silently and the audience couldn't see that process happening, like what percentage would know that the conductor had changed?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to say like under 1%. And probably massively under 1%. And then I started to think, like, I don't know if I would want to, as I just said before, life being short and you're only getting one crack at it, I don't know if I'd want to be doing something where even at the highest level, there's this sense that you're replaceable. And also this sense that you have to this sense that you're just going to do what basically some unbelievably talented, unbelievably gifted musicians have done nigh on perfectly already. Like a classic thing, I don't know, record all the symphonies of Beethoven. If you look at the conductors that have already recorded the symphonies of Beethoven, given that's a standard thing to do, like what on earth are you going to add to that?
It's almost like the downside's bigger than the upside. The downside if you mess it up.
For that legacy. And then I think I will be more proud of my life. I will be happier in the doing of my life and less anxious in the doing of my life, and just more creatively fulfilled as a person if I'm doing something that only I could do.
The lifestyle design thing, because I'm fascinated by that. And the way I see it is like, it's only, and Tim Ferriss just, a lot of that book's kind of a bit cheesy, but there's a few really good points now. And one is that, like we inherit like certain options, which is like, you take a job and the job is 40 to 60 to 80 hours a week, depending on what you work in. Or maybe you can start a business, and that's a whole complex process involved in hiring people. But the kind of the a lot of it's been driven by kind of web tools and just a new way of being able to work. In that, you can create a business with just cooperating with people, on an ad hoc basis, and
Yep.
and work a whole new type of lifestyle for yourself based around what do you want? Do you want to be able to live in different countries? Do you want to be able to take Fridays off, or just basic fundamental day-to-day things? That's kind of how I see the processes of the whole lifestyle design.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it came from exactly that not wanting to compromise. So not wanting to compromise between being wildly ambitious and wildly ambitious in a kind of public sense, in that I wanted to achieve these amazing things, really ambitious in a personal sense. I want to become the best musician I can be. But then also the kind of have your cake and eat it mentality of also wanting to have an amazing family life, social life, having lots of free time to pursue other things. And as you were saying, probably think that a kind of outlook that traditionally would have been impossible, that you're going to have to choose between one of those two philosophies of having this very rounded, very balanced life, or having this very extreme but very high achieving life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, isn't it another thing? I mean, I'd imagine it must be incredibly competitive to get one of these jobs as a kind of house conductor for an orchestra. I mean, I'm just thinking, say, the UK. I mean, I'd imagine there's less than 100, 10, maybe 50 of these jobs. I mean, what would you say? How many people would you say in the UK?
There's 4 major London orchestras. There's Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra in the south of England. Then there's probably going to get shocked because I'm going to leave one out. But then there's in the north of England, there's 2 orchestras in Manchester. There's the Royal Liverpool Phil, CBSO, Birmingham. So that's 8
not a lot.
Orchestras. Then you've got other things like the Royal Opera House, Opera North, English National Opera. But you're going to come to definitely, and then smaller groups as well that are no less amazing, but perhaps have slightly less kind of complete schedules of concerts they're not performing week in, week out. 5 major orchestras in London, BBC Symphony as well. So there we go. Yeah. Haven't made anyone angry, I don't think. Yeah, so tiny number of jobs, and obviously some people are totally brilliant and get jobs like that quite early on in life, and other people no less brilliant actually that have to wait decades to get those kinds of jobs. But as the older I grew, the more I saw the prices not being worth what one has to pay.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So cool.
That's like even assuming that one's good enough to even get there, which is a whole nother question entirely. But that's just.
But I'm sure you're an ambitious guy, and I think if you decided you wanted to do that, you'd have said, okay, here's how I'm going to attempt to achieve this, and I'll do my and it's going to be a numbers game at the end of the day, isn't it? Because if you're saying there's 10, 20, really optimistically 20 jobs, I mean that's nothing really. That's it's easy to become a professional footballer probably, because there's more paying jobs in the UK doing that.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean there are. That's the simple fact. So anyway, going on from what you were saying there. So the first time I started organising events, as I alluded to, was kind of a means to an end to start this career. And then I became more and more interested in this orchestra that I'd started called the Arensky Chamber Orchestra, which I started at 19. It was a professional orchestra. And so I'd got kind of funding, government funding, and this and that and the other kind of funding. I'd managed to write grant applications, this kind of thing, get it all in and start performing concerts. I mean, the people that I was so lucky that the people that I fell in with were quite a bit older than me, so they brought quite a lot of artistic subtlety to the equation and a lot of higher goals for the orchestra of changing how classical music is presented, creating a context that's a lot more modern and that maybe attracts a completely new audience, and beyond that, a context of performing classical music that's more authentic to who we are, which is regular young people, rather than the context for classical music that it's usually performed in, which is perhaps was invented by a prior generation and suits their ideals rather than our own. So it took on this loftier mission that I had not anticipated, and I think because of that I then became more and more engrossed in making it work, because that was such an interesting thing to be doing. And that went on for 8 or 9 years, and I have to be honest and say that did well enough that it never quite died, but it never became some smash hit success. And it really did get to the point a couple of years ago where I think I had sort of got to the stage where I decided that I'd really tried this stuff and I'd really tried to make a difference and make a change, and that probably there was a reason why all conductors go into that standard career path that we just been discussing, and that maybe that was the thing to do. And kind of a few things came together that we got a little chunk of money. A different friend actually who'd been playing timpani in the orchestra but not been involved in managing it or organizing things said to me, I'd be really interested in coming on board in a sort of more managery way as well as playing if you wanted. So this slight kind of injection in terms of capacity of what we could achieve, a bit of injection in money. And we just took a punt on this thing called Night's Darkling Glory, which was an immersive experience based on a Wagner opera called Tristan and Isolde.
Right.
And that was 2017. So
you came up with this idea, or somebody else came up with the idea?
In 2009, our third ever concert had been called The Transfigured Night, and we had attempted to create an immersive experience around this piece called Transfigured Night, which is about a couple that meet in this kind of spooky forest. It's got a whole poem that goes with it. And it's this couple that meet in this forest, and she's pregnant with another man's child. You've got to think this is written in 1901, so it's pretty out there for 1901, this poem. She's pregnant with another man's child, and it's called The Transfigured Night because his response is that actually, through loving the child, without condition, the child will be his. But regardless of who the biological father is, so super modern concept for 1901. But because it's obviously set in this forest and et cetera, in the middle of the night, we had wanted to create. We had said, wouldn't it be cool if you could create a transfigured night where you thought you were walking into a concert hall and instead you walked into a forest in the middle of, you walked into a forest in the middle of the night. And we did some really cool things in that concert, but absolutely didn't come close to this goal. But it sat there in the back of the mind as like, that's what we're really trying to do.
Wow. That's what did you rent like a sort of an industrial space?
Yeah, there's a place called Cadogan Hall, which is in Sloane Square, which is a just really kind of relatively famous classic hall in the middle of London. And we worked, again, we didn't know what we were trying to do. So we worked with visual artists from the Royal College of Art, and they made some amazing pieces. But now looking back on it, I realized that I was meaning to work with set designers, not fine artists.
Right. Yeah.
To make this thing. So we got these like very cool installations and what have you, but not what we were looking for. But anyway, the seed was planted and it sort of was sitting there for 9 years. And then in the meantime, obviously all this stuff came to be like Secret Cinema, Punchdrunk being, I guess, the most famous two. And then this word like immersive experience became part of, at least in England and probably the States, became part of like standard vocab.
Yeah, when do you think that started? Because I started hearing about it. I've been living in Prague for 14 years now, and I'm just starting to hear about it here. But I think was it maybe 5 years ago, or was it longer than that, do you think?
I think 10 years ago. Yeah, definitely Punchdrunk is older than 10 years, which I suppose is the sort of daddy of them all.
And what's Punchdrunk? Can you just people
theatre.
Who don't know?
Punchdrunk is like an immersive theatre company. I don't know their history enough, but I suppose they, to me anyway, are the first like really famous company for taking this concept of like promenading theatre, which I guess has been around for ages, and turning it into something more extreme and more immersive, being the obvious word. So, like I said, we tried to create immersive experience without really knowing what we were doing and not really knowing how to do it. And in the meantime, all of this stuff had grown up whereby we were able to kind of see how you should do it. And people existed with websites called immersive set designers that like in 2009 didn't exist.
Right. There's a whole industry of people who make sets for immersive experiences then.
Yeah, totally. Like now you can just Google immersive set designer and you can find an immersive set designer. So which is what we were able to do, for example. Almost this like last throw of the dice. For me anyway, I said, all right, let's try and do this grand thing that was always our ambition, because it's now a bit more obvious how we might be able to do it. And so we put on this event over a long weekend, about 1,000 people on a sort of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, called In Night's Darkling Glory, an immersive music experience based on the opera Tristan and Isolde. Yeah, it was just like successful beyond our wildest.
So I've got to say, obviously we've skipped a big point here. How did you get 1,000 people to come to this event? That's some pretty impressive promotion skills. Like, did you have a list, an email list? Did did you have a network of people who promoted it to their network, or how did you get the word out?
Well, I think one of the strengths of our group of three is three that are now the directors of our events company that was born out of this immersive music experience. We've always been quite contrarian thinkers, and I think we've always it's a quote, I'm sure, in the 4-Hour Workweek. There's something like, if you're on the side of the majority,
you're
you
wrong.
should stop and think, or something. It's a Mark Twain quote. There's something about being on the side of the majority, and basically that being a warning sign. And I know I've always lived my life on those terms. And I think my two co-directors, Rowan and Eddie, have a similar way of thinking, based on Facebook advertising.
Wow.
Like pretty much exclusively based on paid social media advertising. I don't know if anyone out there listens to a chap called Gary Vaynerchuk.
I'm like, my wife she just goes crazy me watching Gary Vaynerchuk videos. Yeah, I'm a victim of his.
So
videos.
I think that he, I do like his videos and stuff like that, but I haven't read his books and things. But just one of the things I've always picked up on him is that he's always said sort of social media advertising is wildly underpriced, wildly effective, actually. And so I think that
I think he's saying right now Instagram is what he's saying is a really underpriced one. He seems to keep coming back to this for now.
I just decided that when you just look at it logically and you stand back and you think, like, actually, what do flyers and posters and things do versus what things that you see on social media do? And I was just fairly convinced that there was this power in social media advertising that was just, it sounds so weird because I think it's one of those things that everyone knows and not that many people actually do. Like when you say, oh, there's immense power in social media, but, oh, yeah, of course there is. But then when you look at how people spend their money and their time, don't think they go like all in on it. I mean, I think the concept that I'm drawn to, just by looking at what my friends who aren't musicians, how they choose to spend their time, it's all done on word of mouth. It's such a cliche, but it's true. So I think the great power of social media advertising is because it's integrated into the platform that you're advertising on, it kind of has a bit of word of mouth vibe to it. Even though it's a paid advert, you've paid for it to be on their feed, because it's in a sort of word of mouth platform. I think you get engagement because people are in that word of mouth zone. So, oh, that's interesting, I'm going to look on that. I'm going to click on that, compared to seeing a billboard, which is just obviously a piece of advertising. I think there's that. And I think then we also just basically worked almost exclusively with bloggers and influencers. Again, as a form of sort of a very quick way to get word of mouth spread, because, when I just look at Amy, who follows quite a few blogs, she really trusts those people. They're kind of like not pseudo friends, but you know what I mean? Quasi friends.
Definitely.
Because you like what they do. They're very consistent in their communications with you. They're quite honest in their communications with you. So you feel like you know them. So then when they recommend something, if you're going to believe it. So we just worked with those two channels, really. Blog, that sort of online blog channel. Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, social media.
I'm curious, did you figure this out yourself, the whole Facebook ad thing, or did you outsource it, or did one of your partners do it? I'm curious if you thought, I'm just going to learn everything about this and do it myself.
Just totally did it ourselves.
That's cool.
Totally did it ourselves. Cool. Made loads of mistakes. I remember this. I'm sitting in my kitchen now, and I can actually remember the time when, like, I think it wasn't anything particularly sinister. I think we literally just like mucked up our billing, and we got locked out of our Facebook ads account. And you've got all these horror stories online of people's businesses imploding because they get locked out of their Facebook ad account. And it's actually quite opaque as to how you get in touch with anyone to get it resolved. But anyway, so there have been loads of things down the line like that. I remember that being like the one where I literally thought it was the end of the world, because our advertising was going so well, and then just suddenly have this message like, you've been locked out of your Facebook account. Yeah, it just turned out it's because like something had gone wrong with our billing, so they thought we weren't paying for our ads. So as soon as we fixed it, it came back. But anyway. Just made our own mistakes, and I think just learned by being a practitioner, really.
That's cool. So back to the story. You've got like about 1,000 people to come to this event, is that right?
Yeah, 1,250, I think it was in the end, people to come to this event in Night's Darkling Glory. So you had a meal being cooked by Natalie Coleman, who won MasterChef here in the UK about 2012. She's cooking this medieval feast type thing. And then you had a cast of actors, but one main character who was kind of telling the story of Tristan and Isolde, which is actually an ancient medieval British legend and beyond, Celtic legends, and back, people think its roots are in like ancient Persian legends and stuff like that. So anyway, sort of classic love potion story, forbidden love from rival clans kind of thing that Wagner turned into one of the most amazing operas that exists. And you kind of have this 3-part experience that was a dining experience, a theatre/storytelling experience, and then a music experience where you arrived. There was a 3-story venue, and you ate in a kind of again, quote unquote, castle on the bottom floor. Then you travelled across the sea in a boat on the 2nd floor, and then on the 3rd floor you arrived in a magical forest in France. This is all just elements from the story. You arrived in this magical place in France where there was this live orchestra waiting for you, and they played you music from the opera along with the kind of final punchline of the story. Yeah, you heard this live orchestra perform, and this opera singer playing Isolde appeared in this miraculous vision. Tristan and Isolde both die in the opera, classic opera. So we have this vision of Isolde who appears. The punchline of the opera is that actually their death, which is thought to be a tragedy, is actually not. It's actually sort of glorious because they're both at peace and at rest, and they're with each other completely unmolested in a way that would never have been possible in life because they're from rival, like I said, rival kingdoms.
Right.
Everything stood between them in real life, and in death they are together forever, kind of thing. So you had this vision of her at the end revealing to everyone that actually this great tragedy was no tragedy at all. And then people went off into the night having heard this amazing music. Yeah, it was kind of a success. I mean, there's loads wrong with it, as you can imagine, because I think we basically, I don't want to be presumptuous, but I think we're doing what no one has ever done before.
So with this event, I'm really curious. Obviously, you come up with a concept. You work with the art students or whatever, when you should have gone for the set designers. But you work with a bunch of artists. You get the musicians, the chefs. There's a lot of things to coordinate on the night. You've got to coordinate the actors. You've got to coordinate food and everything. And most importantly, you've got a lot of customers to do. So were the 3 of you on their staff running it yourself? Were you the people actually coordinating it?
It's the most insane weekend of my entire life. Yeah, I mean, there'd be times when I remember Eddie, because he played there's just so many wild stories from that weekend of things that happened just because it was only the 3 of us running it, really. I mean, there was
Can you remember any particular story of anything that happened there, though?
Definitely my favourite story. So we'd hired a piper, like a proper Scottish piper, because it just fitted so well with this medieval theme. He kind of would play intermittently in the banquet area, in that kind of castle area. It was pretty cool, gave it such a strong flavour of medievalness. But then I just remember there's one of the nights, because he didn't quite get the whole thing, because I don't think many people do. It's quite a new. So there was one time when everyone had moved upstairs to the ship, and I don't think he realised that they were there. Actually, that was the 2nd stage of the performance. The kitchen for the artist was on the opposite side of the ship. So he literally just walked into the ship, walked through, made himself a cup of tea, and walked. It's absolutely not his fault. It's entirely our fault because no one's in charge letting people know what to do. That was absolutely brilliant.
What about like attendees coming late and things? Do you have to be really strict on that, or do you find a way to sneak them in without ruining the whole experience?
Yeah, I mean, we were really strict on that. I mean, I think what's quite good is that because in terms of making an immersive event, we're definitely not the first people to be doing an immersive event in general. We're kind of able to just basically look at other event makers' literature and just see the practical points that they're stressing and kind of realize ahead of time those are obviously the things that go wrong. Yep. Like, for example, we have a really strict latecomers policy and we just plaster it over everything.
Yep.
And it's just said umpteen times in the build up to the event. So yeah. I think we were quite those kind of things. We probably spared quite a few problems just by being able to see what other people had done in this particular kind of immersive space.
Sure.
So in the early days, it was just literally the 3 of us doing it.
Wow.
It was completely bananas. You just see you'd see. I mean, I couldn't because I was kind of conducting the orchestra, but so many times, particularly like Eddie, who played the timpani, there's easily like evenings where I'd just be, where on earth is Eddie? Because he's normally at the back of the orchestra playing the timpani, and he'd be sort of sorting out 1,000,001 problems on all the other floors.
I imagine.
And so literally couldn't come up and play the drums right now in the performance and things like this. I mean, I'm really painting it, but I mean, obviously overall it was a really like brilliant success, and I think it was a really amazing experience for people, because I don't think those are art forms that a lot of people come into contact with, and particularly not where they can just like. But the first floor had a lot of chairs, but had also sofas and beanbags and things like this that people kind of sat down on, laid down on, whatever.
Sounds great. Like,
I think for all its flaws, I think the vast majority of people forgave it its flaws just because it offered so many kind of magical and special moments for them. And the feedback was just really uplifting. And I think what was also really exciting was that it presented a model that was commercially viable. I think, like, to a lot of people, that doesn't sound that extraordinary, because that's how life works. But in classical music, the entirety of classical music, you're just taught from a very young age that classical music is a loss-making industry, and that it has to, depending on what country you live in, it has to get propped up by the government, it has to get propped up by private donors, by charities. Basically, it has to get propped up by someone, because there's absolutely no way that a classical music endeavour, apart from maybe a solo artist, I guess a solo artist just doing their own thing can be self-sufficient, but that a large classical music organisation absolutely cannot be self-funding. And one of the things that kind of got revealed through what we were doing was that actually this model, this slightly more theatrical model of presenting classical music, was potentially self-funding. And like, we're now at the stage where we're a limited company, not a charity, which is almost entirely unique in kind of, in inverted commas, serious classical music. I mean, I don't know what that means, but in terms of people really not trying to be commercial, but trying to just make extraordinary works of art with classical music, it's pretty much, I don't know anyone else that is a limited company and not a registered charity.
I think the two are not against each other, because if you make amazing works of art, people will come to it. They're not going to come to kind of a half-assed greatest hits with a few actors walking around. It's got to be an amazing experience and true to whatever the piece you're doing. Then it's going to be successful. I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the kind of beliefs that we were able not to walk in with, which I think a lot of people walk into classical music with on the making side of classical music, is that like, young people don't want to pay for classical music, but actually, or young people don't have money, which obviously there's a sector of society that doesn't have money to go to culture. It's really important that we find ways to make sure that they can come and experience it. But in general, just talking about general people, a young person will, I mean, I don't know how much a ticket is to Glastonbury, right? But a sort of person in their teens, 20s, 30s will drop hundreds of pounds without thinking, plus all the accommodation, travel, whatever it is, hundreds of pounds on a ticket to Glastonbury. So obviously price isn't actually a demotivator, like, if it's desirable. Sure. So I think a lot of people in classical music, they focus on making it cheaper, whereas they should be focusing on making it desirable, which is what, I mean, Night's Darkling Glory is not cheap at all, but it was really desirable. So people wanted to pay the money to come, and our events continue to follow in that vein. It's classical music. It's not anything.
Are you repeating? I think you said it was like a long weekend. Are you still repeating this event, or is it over now?
So that event's over. That event is over. I think that basically we've done two really large experiences. We've done that and a thing called the Great Masked Ball, which we did this summer, which was basically Swan Lake. Right. The story of Swan Lake, the music of Swan Lake, the dancing of Swan Lake. I think both of them are ideas that we would definitely want to repeat and bring back, but I kind of consider those two events to be, to a degree, our education in making what we're trying to make, which is this like kind of new genre of live orchestral music.
And did you get, I'm curious if you got a lot of attendees who went to the first event coming to the second one, coming to Swan Lake?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Like, I mean, I think there are always going to be people who, like with anything, like you said with punk rock, there are going to be people that love punk rock and people that just don't like punk rock, and that's nothing to. So there are obviously going to be people that just, whatever you do with classical music, they're just not going to like classical music because that's just the taste. Yep. But I think that, we were really happy with the percentage of people that wanted to come again. I mean, I think the only failing in that regard, I think sometimes that we make is because we're striving to be so perfect and make such leaps and bounds in what we do every time. I don't think people realize it's just three young guys like in their bedrooms making these things. I think people sometimes think we have a kind of 10-story office block and 100 employees sometimes. And I think even more people would have come back. I mean, that's something I'm actually in the process of doing right now, with our second event having been done for about a month or two, is actually finding ways to let these people that are like the really early adopters, the people that have purchased what we make inside its first year of existence, like letting them know that, like you guys have done with Eventframe. I mean, I've been in touch with you guys about certain things that I'd love to do with Eventframe for art events, and they can't be done right now. But that's absolutely fine because I kind of get where you are in the process. Whereas probably if I thought that you were a 300-person employee company and you said to me, "Oh, this thing isn't possible," I'd have a very different reaction to the reaction I have today. And I think so something that I'm trying to do is get a bit more of the story I'm telling you now out to our audience, because I think that would increase even more the people. Because the people that we've been able to speak to in person, where we've been able to say, "Oh, this is the story, like this is the overarching story behind this company," then they become like, not even just they were fans, and now they become sort
super
of
fans. I wouldn't even consider it. I mean, you should definitely do that. I mean, 100% you should get everything out, because your story, like it's engaging to me, and 100% is to people listening to this, and that's like, that adds a whole new dimension to it. It's not just like a cool event based on this piece of music or whatever. It's actually, there's a whole backstory which is just as interesting, you know, about how you're finding a way to build this kind of lifestyle for yourself, and how you're young guys doing this, and I think people would love that. Have you got an email list, by the way? Are you emailing everyone who went to your previous event about using something like MailChimp?
When I talk about social media advertising, I think because I'm not one of these kind of Gary Vaynerchuk, like always on social media types. I mean, I know I just said we're basically all in on social media in terms of our advertising, but I don't use social media at all.
Really?
I profile on Facebook because I need one to advertise on Facebook, ironically. So what we do, funnel everyone into a mailing list, and then we use the mailing list to sell rather than using the social ads to sell. We use the social ads to let people know about the event and then to sign up for alerts about the event. And then we use our email list. I feel most comfortable with that because I don't think I'm clever enough or intelligent enough when it comes to social media channels to know when something is going to be a Facebook versus when it's going to be a MySpace. And I'd hate to have like invested zillions of pounds into developing like a Facebook following only to find that Facebook is actually the next MySpace. Whereas email, I'm 99% sure is going to be around for a very, very long time.
Definitely. So, and can I ask what email software you're using? Are you using MailChimp or something different?
Yeah, MailChimp. Using MailChimp. Also using text messaging. I think text messaging is pretty cool and underrated, because like what percentage of text messages do you open?
Yeah.
Like 100% virtually. 90% of text messages do you open? So another thing that we do sometimes is, as much as possible, particularly people that came to our events, is collect their phone number data, because I think that's a really cool. I remember the way we alerted our past bookers to this Swan Lake thing. So people that have booked Night's Darkling Glory, the way we alerted them all to Swan Lake, the Great Mass Ball, was we sent them a text saying something like, "The Black Swan has chosen you."
Right.
Or something like that. And can you imagine you're sitting at work and then you get a text message out of the blue from Prince Siegfried's palace saying, "The Black Swan has chosen you." Like, it's such a cool, I think it's
Definitely.
such an underrated form of communicating, particularly with people.
You've got the great thing. You can make the communication part of the experience, like the email or the text or anything can be part of the whole, it can be in this theme of whatever you're doing.
And that's a big, That's absolutely something we do. I do think like we have a lot of strength in written words in our group. There's a lot of people that can write pretty well. So we lean on that a lot. To create the world, as you said.
Great. Was the Great Christmas Feast the kind of next thing you got onto?
Yeah, absolutely. So that came out of the Great Mass Ball. I mean, kind of good thing, bad thing. I think about the Great Masked Ball was that that was like the best part of 7,000 people that came to the Great Masked
Wow.
Ball.
Where did you hold that? Sorry.
A warehouse in Peckham. We just found
Right.
this massive old warehouse in Peckham. Actually, it was a skate park, an indoor skate park that had just newly been torn down. So about a month after it had been torn down, we just got in there building this fantastical Swan Lake Palace and an enchanted lake.
Wow.
Into there. So we sort of, it's kind of funny. We learned so much from In Night's Darkling Glory. And so in a way, it gave us the power to create this event that was literally 5 to 6 times the size. But unfortunately, the thing that made that so challenging was that it was then basically a completely new kind of event. So we sort of learned all this stuff about how to run an event for 1,250 people, but actually an awful lot of things change when it becomes 6,000, 7,000 people. So that was, again, another absolutely brilliant, another experience that we're incredibly proud of, that I think has like loads of absolutely amazing things in it, but another really hairy and not long weekend, like really hairy 4 weeks.
And I'm sure that's a whole different level of logistics. You've got to have security guards and things like that, and a whole extra group of people you didn't have for the previous events.
Yeah, exactly. And particularly the mechanics of running a theatre production. That's basically what you're doing. It's quasi West End or Broadway, isn't it, at that stage? And I think what we've learned from that is the whole. Unfortunately, after the event, when we sat down and said, why was that so unbelievably difficult to make it work, and like how do West End people manage to do it for like often 10 years without a break on shows. We kind of learned about the whole mechanics of theatre producers and then this whole unseen logistical group of people that actually just make shows happen smooth. That whole basically theatre producers or just producers in general becomes the thing that you need to know about. So
and the longer you run things and the more you run things, the easier it gets because it becomes a process. You know, like I remember.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I run a lot of events for schools. Like they're all of technical events for schools. And in the beginning, I did it just me. I ran a conference for 150 people, and it was crazy. I was running around. It was literally just trying to stay afloat. And then, but now we run 300 plus a year. We've got a team, and the team's doing the same thing week in, week out. And there's always problems, but still, if somebody's working full time on something, you get a process going. So the longer you run it, the easier it gets.
Yeah, totally. And so, I mean, I think that actually, in a way, that was not the motivation for the Great Christmas Feast in terms of as an artistic concept and as an event that people are going to love. But I think one thing that attracted us to the idea is that it's a lot smaller than the Great Masked Ball. I mean, just don't talk to me about the similarity between those two names. We think of anything better. We literally
you've got 80 people a night, I think, from the website.
Yeah, exactly. So it's 80 people a night, and I think one of the things that attracted us to it was the opportunity it gave us to do something perfectly. Because I think, as most people probably experience that have started a startup in any field that has achieved like relatively explosive growth, you're sort of always going by the seat of your pants because you're growing so fast. And I think it was really quite attractive to me, at least, this idea that actually the third thing should be a bit smaller than the second thing, and that actually the kind of breathing space that gave us meant that the focus could be instead of growth and getting bigger and bolder and whatever, the focus could be on doing something really beautiful and a bit smaller and doing it absolutely irreproachably perfectly across the board.
And again, it's like we said in the beginning of the podcast, kind of a Dickensian Christmas Carol experience. And have you run it? Is this the second year you've done it, or what's
No. So this is a completely new show.
Completely new, right? Okay, great.
This is our third show, completely new, much smaller than the second one, at least, and slightly smaller, at least in numbers per night, than the first one. And we're just really excited about, I think it's going to be a really, really beautiful concept. I absolutely love A Christmas Carol. It's been really exciting learning about, you think of A Christmas Carol, the story by Dickens, almost being a cliched part of Christmas culture. And actually at the time, it's radically inventive in that a lot of the Christmas traditions that it depicts, that it's, Dickens almost made them up really, because he had this really, really strong social motivation, which is that he wanted to write this polemic about how dire the situation was with poverty in Victorian England, and how it was just sort of brushed under the carpet, and how actually not only was it terrible for those people, but it would have these repercussions down the years. If England created this incredibly impoverished, poorly educated lower class, and then he realized that his middle class readers would be made really uncomfortable by a kind of firebrand style political speech, and instead he said, I'm going to write this really inspiring story that is actually, I'm not going to tell people they need to give money to the poor or whatever. I'm just going to write a story in which that is made to look so important and so just special that people are actually going to do the things that I was intending to demand they do, through inspiration rather than through sort of forcing them to do it. So actually, you just would never think that that's what a Christmas Carol is about. But
no,
actually,
not at all.
So amazing things happened, like just a lot of traditions sprung up from the book. Actually, I think there was this complete revolution in Victorian England of the humanitarian side of Christmas, whereby it's whether you're a Christian or not, it's this time when families come together, when they reunite, when all these social things of kind of parties and playing games and having meals together. This sort of really powerful social impact of Christmas, whether you see it as a religious festival or not. That started or was revived in Victorian times, and Dickens was a massive part of that, because I think prior to that point, that whole sort of idea of big Christmas feast was seen as quite a whimsical, outdated countryside, rural thing, and Dickens painted this idea of a urban Christmas that I'm not sure existed that strongly prior to that point. It's really hard for us to imagine. Wow. But he became a massive part of the tradition that we love now. Actually, this book was a huge part of it. Rather than being something that typifies it actually is a big motivating force behind it. And like, things happened in Victoria, and people started doing things like giving workers Christmas Day off and giving them presents. Companies would treat their employees nicely at Christmas, and a lot of people were inspired by reading Christmas Carol in the 1800s for the first time to do this stuff. Like, I think until her death, the Queen of Norway sent presents to kids poor children in Britain with a label with Tiny Tim's love. People reported, like London papers reported, philanthropy like skyrocketing in the years after Christmas Carol was published. Really amazing things. It's actually quite an extraordinary work of literature and quite a profound effect that I think very few books ever have done.
I didn't realize the impact it had on kind of the reboot of Christmas, effectively.
Yeah. It was definitely a big part of it. I don't think I know enough about the history of that period to be able to sit here and say like that's what it was. Yeah. But it was definitely a part of this Victorian reboot of Christmas that definitely was a kind of thing that happened in the Victorian era. Like I said, it did actually, in the way that quite a few things do, it did achieve quite a lot of its social mission.
Definitely.
To show people that actually there were these unbelievably impoverished people living just conveniently out of earshot of the middle classes and things like this.
And how are you doing it? Essentially, I guess you're promoting it via social media, etc. And people get to the website, they register, but they don't know the location. I guess a lot of people with these immersive experiences do something similar. It's a secret location. They get told, I guess, the day before or the day of the event.
Yeah, so I mean, we tell people after they've booked their tickets actually where to go.
I guess London's such a big place, you couldn't go too crazy on the hidden location.
I mean, some people do it. Some people do it on the day, but I'm not sure. I think just for a variety of reasons, we decided that we quite like the idea of you getting sent it as you booked. Really. Yeah. So that was that. So that's that. Yeah. And the format we keep quite secret. Again, we even do secret sales. So that's something I really enjoy doing. I think it puts a lot of fun into the buying process, which then that becomes actually part of the experience, becomes the buying process. So you just put your email in on a website, and then you get a series of emails, the last of which gives you a secret ticket link that you can use.
Fantastic. And so I guess you've resigned yourself to the fact that you're going to be working over Christmas, then, I guess, if you're running now.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is a lot smaller. So actually, I'm sort of vaguely hopeful that I'm going to get at least a little bit of a Christmas holiday because there's absolutely live music. So we rebranded the Arensky Chamber Orchestra into a company called the Lost Estate. So that's like who we are now is the Lost Estate. Like the Lost Estate, any event that we do, big or small, will always have live music in it because that is the core of what we do.
Sure.
We are about live music. But actually, this doesn't have an orchestra in it. Just has a group of musicians. I think orchestra would be weird in such an intimate context, but it has a group of live musicians. But it does mean that hopefully all the stuff you were talking about process, if we can get the kind of process up and running, I'm still vaguely hopeful I might get a bit of a Christmas holiday.
Yeah.
But if I don't, c'est la vie. I mean, I have to say, like I've never. One of the things I really love about the Lost Estate is I feel the same way I did when I was like 19 and I hadn't been sort of hit in the face a lot of times by music, and you've still got all that energy because you're so fresh to it. It feels the same again, like running this company, just because of all the things we've spoken about like the fact that it actually makes money and the freedom that gives us, not like the money that we make in our bank accounts, but actually the freedom that because we're a profit-making organization, we can have really wild dreams about what we want to do creatively in a way that we never could. So yeah, to be honest, if that means I have to work over Christmas, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. To come back to Gary Vaynerchuk, and I've got my reservations. I kind of like, if I'm kind of waiting for the baby to go to sleep, I'll put on a Gary Vaynerchuk video on my phone, and it's kind of, I kind of like just watching his crazy energy. But he's got something he talks about clouds and dirt, which it describes you in some ways as well. He focuses on two things, like the down and dirty nitty gritty logistics that you've got to think about, and then the big picture, the big picture stuff of what we're going. And I think that's kind of you've talked about those kind of two things, the really the base stuff which you have to do logistically to run an event, and the high level stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose each is meaningless without the other. Maybe. I mean, we talk about that a lot in terms of. Strategy always having, because I think you can get down so many rabbit holes, can't you, with things like branding, for example, being a classic one where you can get down so many rabbit holes where there's no real practical application to it. But then at the same time, like to an extent, stuff about brand, like just knowing, I mean, I think even simple stuff, like for us, I would just say as simple things as knowing who our events make you become, if that makes sense, as what kind of identity they give you as a person for coming, and like what the point is of our events. Like when I say Lost Estate, you say X. What am I striving for in that regard? And like who do I want you to feel like you are when you leave one of our events in that regard? Like, so stuff like just some simple kind of high level stuff like that can really inform the like you said, the nitty gritty of what you're trying to do, and can actually have a massively powerful impact. So I think it's about finding a balance. Definitely.
Well, look, I know we've gone on way longer. It's been a fascinating conversation from my side. Can we give the website out because this is going to go out next week, so there's still a few places left, I think. And
yeah, totally. Things you can do. You could either go to www.greatchristmasfeast.com to find out about the Great Christmas Feast. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about the Lost Estate, it's simply www.thelostestate.com. Those are the two best places to go. Lostestate.com, thelostestate.com, sorry, you can watch a video from our Tristan and Isolde show, with the In Night's Darkling Glory, the one we spoke about, that gives you kind of a flavour of what we're about. And then, if you'd like to come along to the Great Christmas Feast, we'd love to have you. It's really, I think I'm really excited about it. It's got this whole sort of storytelling thing, live music, lots of music that we've written specially for the occasion, and then it's got this amazing, you can see it on the website, a really special 4-course feast. There's going to be a lot of theatricality in the food, as well as some brilliant tastes. And I think it's a really nice twist on a Christmas meal. It's all the feelings you'd want from a Christmas meal, but like not the dishes you'd expect to give you that feeling, I think, if that makes sense. So it won't make you feel like, oh, this is all very fancy, but I wish it was just a proper Christmas meal. It'll like deliver that Christmas warmth, but in completely new ways.
That's amazing. I can definitely say, I mean, we've got a small baby at home, so I can't come in December, but I would definitely come. And I genuinely hope you run it next year, because I'll come along with my wife, and for sure we'll be there.
Oh, amazing. Thanks so much, Dan. I really appreciate
Look,
it.
it's a real pleasure. All the best, and thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Dan. All right, take care.
Do you want to sell more tickets to your amazing events? EventsFrame event ticketing has been built to minimize the amount of time it takes to buy a ticket. Result? You sell more tickets. Check out eventsframe.com.